we're going. The sugar will bind to LDL molecules. Have you heard about the bad cholesterol? The LDL piece is the bad. There's two problems with the bad cholesterol. I don't consider it bad, but there are two problems with it. One is it can oxidize, causing free radicals. The second problem is glucose molecules can hook onto it. Now it's sticky. Unfortunately, once you have glycosylated LDL, it doesn't shut off the cholesterol synthesis, and you make more cholesterol. Now, that's really not a problem from my standpoint. There is no relationship between cholesterol and heart disease. We're not going to develop that. And half of you that don't believe it, I'm not going to convince you in the next 10 seconds that that's true. But there's absolutely no research support saying that cholesterol causes heart disease. That is all fraud on the American public. So glycosylated, so that's all I'm going to say about it. Glycosylated red blood cells, we already talked about it. They're sticky, so they're going to connect to each other. Once you have red blood cells connected to each other, they're not going to go through the body. The purpose of red blood cells is to carry oxygen. Now, there are little tiny capillaries. We have these big vessels coming out of the heart, smaller and smaller vessels going down the body, and then capillaries is the connection between the arteries and the veins coming back to the heart. Or actually, they're going back to the heart. Capillaries are in between there, little tiny vessels. At the capillary level, the blood leaves the body, and the water part of it leaves the body with all the nutrients, and all that garbage stuff, the leftovers, the carbon dioxide and the toxins that the body is making, then gets into the blood vessel and takes it back to the liver where it can be detoxified, takes it to the heart so it can go to the lungs. All of that takes place. If you look at a capillary under a microscope and you see a red blood cell coming in, some of those red blood cells are so big that they actually have to squeeze down to fit through the capillary. Their shape changes because it's not big enough. Can you imagine what will happen if you have 3 red blood cells stuck together? And now they're coming down the pike and they hit the capillary where all of this exchange takes place. You're going to clog it right up. So that's one of the problems with sticky red blood cells. Glycosylation of the lens. So the little sugar gets into the lens of the eye. And what does the lens do? It filters all our light. And those people with fuzzy lenses, we call them cataracts. Glycosylation of the myelin sheath. Myelin is the fat layer that surrounds all of our nerves. And there's a lot of fat in the brain. So if anybody calls you a fathead, they're right. Tell them, just agree with them. They're smarter than you thought. This myelin sheath is what protects the nerve so the nerve can conduct the impulse. When that myelin sheath is disturbed, then the impulses are disturbed also. So when enough of that disturbing takes place in the sensory system, now you've heard of a lot of diabetics that start getting pain, start getting tingling, start getting numbness. This is just glycosylation, sugar hooking onto the myelin sheath and onto the proteins in the nerve that doesn't let the nerve function like it should. And we give it a fancy name called neuropathy. Atherosclerosis, we've all heard of that with the thickening of the blood vessel wall, the plaque that forms on it, buildup of plaque. This is the single biggest complication of diabetes. Platelets will aggregate because of the stickiness. LDL will aggregate. Red blood cells will aggregate. And the sugar will hook onto the blood vessel wall and cause the blood vessel wall to be sticky. So now we have all this sludging taking place. And before you know it, those feet look a little bit blue. Can't get the oxygen. And then they get darker blue. and then eventually they turn black. So what do we have to do when they turn black? We have to cut them off. But did cutting them off fix the problem? Not a bit. We still have the same problem. So what we want to do and what we're going to talk about is how do we fix the basic problem, not short of cutting the toes off. What happens when the blood flow is reduced to certain organs, like the kidney? Now we start getting into kidney failure. Have you heard of diabetics getting into kidney problems? Retinopathy. You hear about them getting vision problems? All of these are the complications of long-term high sugar in the body. Poor healing from the skin. Now we have infections, trauma. Why don't we heal? Because we can't get any oxygen there. We can't get energy to these areas of the body. Chronic ulcers. Can't heal. No oxygen. So, are you down in the dumps enough? Do you see why we don't want to get high blood sugar levels? Now let's talk about why we don't want to get high insulin levels. Page 12. High insulin levels. Increased fat formation. Why? Because the body knows that it doesn't want sugar in the blood vessel, so it's going to convert the sugar into a fat called triglycerides. So that conversion is going to take place. Now, insulin, triglycerides are one of our energy sources. Remember we talked about that at the beginning. Insulin blocks the conversion of triglycerides into energy. So we don't have our backup form. So diabetics, when they have all the glycogen and they go and do some exercise, and then the body is supposed to convert all the glycogen gone, triglycerides are supposed to be used as energy, insulin blocks that process. So not only do we have trouble losing weight and dropping the triglyceride level, we don't have the energy. And people with high insulin levels, it is practically impossible to lose weight because the process of getting rid of the fat is blocked. Insulin will keep it on. So until that insulin resistance is reduced, all you're going to do is be really frustrated and discouraged. You can drop your intake, you can drop your carbs, you can drop your fat intake, you can exercise, and 6 weeks later, with all this work you've been doing, struggling, and you get on the scales, and how much have you lost? 1.5 pounds, or you gained? No. Well, and you know why you gained is because you didn't lose the fat and you put on some muscle weight. But we're so fixed on the weight versus fat sometimes that we forget that we've gained 5 pounds of muscle. And maybe we lost 2 pounds of fat in the process. But it's not going to come off with the insulin levels high. High insulin enhances sodium reabsorption. Sodium reabsorption means there's more sodium in the bloodstream, and higher blood levels are going to cause higher blood pressure, hypertension. High insulin levels stimulate certain ovarian hormones. So the testosterone level goes up. So now we have more hair growing, more breakouts, skin breakouts. All the androgen or male effects now take place. And perhaps the most important problem with insulin is it is the most toxic inflammatory substance the body makes. So if you want to feel sick, have high insulin levels. Just causes inflammation all over.